So welcome again. My name is Dr. Jackie McDermott, and I am the Assistant Director for Graduate Recruitment and Retention here at Purdue Engineering Office of Graduate Education. So again, I'm really excited to meet all of you guys. This talk will be about 45 minutes today, and then I will leave time for some Q&A at the end for sure. And I will be stopping to ask or to answer some questions throughout specific breaks during the presentation today. And I will most likely focus on the more general questions, but I do hope to get to some of your more specific questions as well. But I will likely try to answer those at the very end. So just know that you might want to hold those more specific questions until the end. Perfect. So what are we going to talk about today? So just like your classes or research, you do have to dedicate time to prepare for your graduate school application. And so today we'll be walking through different topics such as the application process itself, a timeline because we do have some students who are a little bit younger in the application or in their undergraduate studies. We'll briefly touch upon different types of graduate degrees. And then we'll talk about, we'll go more in depth and talk about specific pieces of the graduate application, specifically letters of recommendation, as well as the statement of purpose. And we'll wrap up a little bit with a brief discussion on funding. And so first, I'll give you this disclaimer that in the application, the graduate application process, grad school applications really do differ from undergraduate applications. Undergrad applications are a very centralized process where you apply to X university and then they will review and admit you. However, graduate school really is a more decentralized process where you apply to a graduate program and that application is reviewed by the department itself. So it's very important to follow directions because directions can vary from Purdue to Michigan or even from our Purdue Engineering, say biomedical engineering program to our Aero-Astro program. So the directions will really vary and be dependent on each specific program. The admissions committee tend to be made up of professors. And so this again process can really vary from institution to institution, but applications are really reviewed at that department level. And they really want to know, what are you going to bring to the university? And so it's really important to really talk about any relevant achievements, background, academic background, your potential. And a really important thing is fit. And so a lot of our graduate programs will talk about a holistic review. They want to, they want to see all of your attributes. They're going to take all of that into account as they're looking at you as an applicant. So they're going to look, if you happen to have publications, awesome, great. Some programs are waiving the GRE, and I will hopefully get to that shortly. So that is, again, just a piece of your application. They'll really want to know about your experience. What's your previous research experience? Or if you're thinking about more of a professional master's program, what's your industry experience? So, again, one question I sometimes get is, I have a low GPA or GRE scores, but I have really great research experience. Am I competitive? And so that, again, you want to put your best foot forward for those other pieces of your application so that when the department or the graduate review committee are reviewing your applications, they're going to review it in a holistic manner. And so one bad component or low GPA or weak component won't always break your application. The final decision for your graduate application is sent by our central grad school. So you submit your application, it goes to the department for the review, and then you're accepted or rejected from our central graduate school. And this process takes a while. So I will go over the typical timeline as well shortly. So it's very important to watch deadlines, check minimum requirements. And I did see a question about the GRE in the chat, but there's a big disclaimer and there's a big asterisk on the GRE, and you want to really be checking with your specific program of interest. and you want to check those websites. You want to be reaching out to the program itself if that requirement is not clear. And so I can't give one blanket statement of are the GREs required for 2020. That is really dependent on each and every one of our specific engineering disciplines here at Purdue. So you're going to want to check in to that question, or you want to check into that program directly. So, and with COVID and with accessibility to different standardized tests, you really will want to reach out to programs directly if it's not clear on their graduate websites. Okay, and again, application is only complete when all of your different pieces of the application have been received. So that includes letters of recommendation. So timeline, so transitioning to timeline, the most common term of entry for graduate programs is fall. And so that means that you are actually going to be applying the December before you actually want to start in that fall. And so I recommend that if you haven't already, you want to plan, if you're a senior, you want to plan to take your standardized tests, any exams at the end of the summer, going into your final year of your undergraduate studies. Or the year before you plan to enroll in your graduate degree. You want to take some time to draft your essays and write up your different essays. And you want to start requesting your letters of recommendation and transcripts. And it's very important not to wait till the last minute to ask for those letters of recommendation. Around November, when you come in, you will complete that application. Most deadlines for graduate programs are anywhere between early December and January before the fall of your start. You want to remind your letters of recommendation writers that that those deadlines are approaching. And again, you want to make sure that your application is complete and received before the deadline. And then after you submit your application, whether it's for a master's or a Ph.D., many of those graduate programs will begin making decisions anywhere from January to March. And the standard deadline is April 15th, where graduate programs will ask you to accept or reject their offer. And really, you want to have these different deadlines and the timeline in mind. If you're applying to a PhD program and you're one of their top candidates, typically there's a visitation weekend in the spring where you'll visit with faculty and potentially visit the campus. And again, with COVID, it might be a virtual visit, but we're really hoping to move as many of those visits back onto campus. And during those visits, you really want to be talking with grad students, postdocs, faculty, anyone you can talk with in order to get a really good feel of the environment and in order to ensure that this is the best place for you to do your graduate work. In addition, for them to ensure that you are the best person for their graduate program. So I want to transition to a really important topic, which is, what is the difference between all of these different offices and who do you ask questions to? So, I told you that the graduate application process is highly decentralized. So there's the Purdue University, the Central Graduate School. I told you I work in our College of Engineering graduate office, but then there are those individual school graduate offices as well. So the Central Grad School will manage your application, and they're the ones that will say you are admitted, and they grant admissions. I kind of work to liaise between that Central Graduate School office and your individual school graduate office. And so this is really the engineering discipline you're really excited about pursuing. That graduate discipline or that engineering discipline, they're going to be setting the admissions requirements. They're going to be reviewing the applications. They're going to be sending admissions recommendations to the grad school. So if you have any specific questions about the admissions process for a specific discipline, then you really want to be talking with that individual graduate school office. And so, when in doubt, it's really important to reach out. You can reach out to me if you're not sure who to ask a question to, but we can certainly direct you and help with that. So I want to very quickly transition into different types of graduate degrees. I know that this will potentially be a review to some of you guys, but I want to just make sure that we are all on the same page kind of walking through this presentation. So what is the difference between a master's and a PhD? Well, a master's degree, tends to be a lot shorter. So it's about 30 credits at Purdue. It can be either thesis, which is research and courses, or it can be a non-thesis or a professional degree where you're only taking courses. Your master's degree can take anywhere from 1 to 2 years, and it will open doors to different careers requiring, some specialization, some management positions, and some research. This is really different from a PhD, and a PhD, you can enter that in 2 different ways. So you can come directly in from your undergraduate studies. We call that a direct PhD. This will typically vary based off of program or discipline. Some disciplines welcome direct PhD. Others tend to really suggest that you do a master's degree first. And so that's certainly another avenue to get into the PhD. And a PhD tends to be about 90 credits. You will be performing research, and a dissertation is required at the end. And typically a PhD is about 3 to 5 years after you obtain your master's degree. It can be anywhere from about 4 to 6 if you go directly into your PhD. And I like to think about PhD as a license to think. So with a PhD, you really are going to be a leader in your field, whether that's national labs, academia, industry, and or careers with that research and development flair. And one question I typically get quite often is, can I do a PhD right out of my undergrad? Yes, you certainly can, depending on the engineering or depending on the discipline you're interested in going into. I went directly into my PhD after my undergraduate studies. And again, I would encourage you to check out the specific program that you're interested in, check out their website to confirm that that's an option as well. Another question that I get, especially for engineering, is, do I need an undergrad degree in engineering to pursue my graduate studies in engineering? I'll say, while the vast majority of our engineering graduate students do have an undergraduate engineering degree, we have a number of students who also come in from physics, chemistry, and math backgrounds as well. And so really, the next question is, how do you apply to these programs, whether a master's or a PhD? So I want to take a moment to go through the specific parts of the application. So application consists of that online application form and fee that you'll start nice and early, and then you'll write up a statement of purpose, which I'll go into a little bit more in detail soon. And then you'll get your letters of recommendation. Some programs do require the GRE. Again, you want to check for each specific program. If you're an international student studying outside of the United States, you'll need to submit an English proficiency exam, either TOEFL or IELTS. You'll submit your GPA, your transcripts, and on your resume or CV, you'll include other things such as your previous work experience, research experience, activities, etc. And one really important thing that I do want to mention is that graduate application fee waivers exist. So applying to grad schools can be really expensive, and I want to just let you guys know that that fee waivers exist. I'd recommend to start Googling early to determine whether any of the universities you're interested in applying to have any fee waivers that are applicable to you. So for example, you literally can go during this presentation right now and Google Purdue University graduate application fee waivers. It'll direct you to our graduate school admissions webpage with all of this information. And so know that they're out there, but they're not widely advertised. And so while this presentation doesn't offer, your presence at this does not offer an application fee waiver to Purdue University graduate programs, I'll wrap up this session with some events that do offer one. And so you certainly want to engage and join in those events so that you can apply to our Purdue grad programs for free. So yeah, so I'm gonna keep moving on. And I will pause shortly for some questions, but I'm just gonna keep moving on for right now. So like I said, a big component of the graduate application are standardized tests. There are the GRE is one of the large standardized tests. There are subject-based exams. Typically, engineering programs do not require these subject-based exams. And then depending on what other graduate program you're looking into, the GMAT tends to be required for an MBA. And then English proficiency, TOEFL or IELTS, is that English proficiency is very important and is required if you're an international student studying outside of the United States. If you're an international student studying inside the United States, and if you're planning to graduate your undergrad from a university in the United States, then you do not have to submit an English proficiency exam for your graduate application process at Purdue. And so it's really important to look into that for each university that you are thinking about applying to. And even if you're thinking about taking a couple of years off in between your undergrad studies and your graduate studies, you might want to consider taking the GRE or any of the standardized tests now, just to be prepared in the future. So what other things do you need to submit for your graduate application? You need to submit your GPA, your transcripts, and your diploma. So in terms of your transcripts, if you're applying directly from your undergrad studies and your degree is in progress, then you typically will submit what you have on your transcript to date. And then after you are admitted to a program, that's when you will submit your full transcript when you wrap up your undergrad degree to kind of show that completion. So know that your transcript should really have that list of classes and scores. Admissions committees recognize if you're currently pursuing your degree that will be in progress. If you're applying from an international school and if you're an international student, you want to submit a copy of your diploma. And you'll need to show your official diploma once you're on campus. And if your degree might be printed on your transcript, you might not need that diploma or just submit that diploma as well. Very important that your transcript name, that the name on your transcript matches the name on your graduate application. And finally, your GPA should be reported on a 4.0 scale. And so before I jump into the letter of recommendation and statement of purpose, I'm going to take a couple questions and see if I can answer any of these in the Q&A. But I will be covering more material. So just if you have questions on what I've covered thus far, I can certainly try and field some of those right now. And again, I'm only looking at the Q&A feature, so I'm not looking at the chat right now. So I think I've answered that question about TOEFL scores. If you're studying in the United States and you're an international student, you do not have to submit those. So question of, do you apply to a department multiple times if you're interested in multiple things? They do that are fairly different. So, do you apply to a propulsion lab to do jet engine research or apply again? So what I would say is so Purdue University, the graduate school, has actually revamped how they have their application. What that means is that with your one application, you can apply to, I believe, up to 3 different graduate programs. So what you're kind of talking about with maybe you're interested in Aero Astro, and that's the graduate program you're going to apply to, but there's a couple different research areas under that umbrella that you're interested in. You would only put in one application. In your statement of purpose, which we're going to get to, you would talk about how these different research areas are of interest to you. And typically on an application, you'll also mention the faculty members that you're interested in working with. Okay. A question about resume. Can I update my resume when my application is in review? You can sometimes send an email to the admissions committee to let them know that you maybe have a paper published or this or that. Typically, you cannot send a new copy in. What I recommend is that you make sure that your documents are as complete as possible and are before they're being reviewed. So make sure that your documents are complete when you're sending them in. If something new happens, you can always send an email to the the graduate program itself and let them know about those changes. If you'd like to apply for spring, then typically those deadlines are around now. So you want to look at those application deadlines and pay close attention to that. I will say if you're interested in a PhD, typically most programs do not really enroll PhD students in the spring. They like to have a cohort that starts in the fall. So you want to pay particular attention to what degree you're interested in studying and when those admissions deadlines tend to be. Good question. Yeah, so another spring question. Are there waivers for the application? Yep, covered that. So check out our websites for that. If I were to apply to fall 2020, do we count the grade for fall 2021 since the due date is December 15th? So again, that question, you would submit your grades that are in progress, and then you would submit your final grades upon completion. MEM is Masters of Engineering Management. So there's a question, is there a thesis option for Masters of Engineering Management? Typically not. This tends to be a non-thesis program. So if you have questions about that, I would certainly check in with, at Purdue, it's Eric Vandervoorde and Karen Hull. I have 2 unpublished papers, which I'm sending for publication. Is it recommended to include that in my CV? You can certainly say that those are in prep. So you want to definitely talk about that on your CV. And again, you'll put in prep or submitted, and you can certainly talk about that in your statement of purpose. Okay. Is a 1-page resume preferred over multiple page CV? I think that depends, Fernando, on what you're interested in doing for your career. If you're interested and you're applying to a PhD program, and you're interested in going into a faculty position or maybe becoming a leader after your PhD, then include a CV, right? And it might be multiple page, and that's okay. Put your best foot forward and think about what you want in the future. Okay, trying to keep an eye on time. So in terms of 5 years, if you're doing a BS-MS combo program, are there changes from this application process and GRE requirement? I again look into your specific program of interest. Okay, and I'm going to get to letters of recommendation. So I will come back to some of those questions for sure. So, and if you guys are asking me specific questions that can be found online, I'm not going to answer them here. So, because you guys can Google, each and one of you guys are capable of Googling. So, okay, excellent. I'm going to keep moving on. So we're going to get into letters of recommendation and the statement of purpose. So a letter of recommendation, typically for a graduate application, you're going to want to submit 3. These are highly valued by the admissions committees because it will, show how you work and your potential within a graduate program. And so, it might include a form or a letter. And again, you typically want 3. And these can be in a couple different formats. Like I said, form or letter. So one question I get a lot is, can I have a mentor from a co-op or internship write me a letter? Yes. But it really depends on what type of degree they received and what degree you're looking to earn. For example, if you're looking to go into a PhD program, but your letter of recommendation writer from your internship only has a master's, then how can they comment on your ability to perform in that PhD program? So, another question that I get is, my graduate student knows me best. Can they write me a letter? Because I've been doing research with them. My answer to this is no. A letter should come from a graduate, should not come from a graduate student. But your graduate mentor might work really closely with the faculty member who runs that research lab in order to kind of help craft your letter of recommendation. And so I'd really encourage you to get to know your your faculty member now that you're working with, if you've been kind of close to that graduate student mentor. So, 5 tips for getting a letter of recommendation and get to know your current professors. Very, very important. You want to talk, like I said, you need 3 letters of recommendation. So you want to select professors who can talk about your different strengths and really give that holistic picture of you as a researcher and you as a future grad student. When you're asking for letters of recommendation, you want to give plenty of notice and you want to make their job easy. So when I say make their job easy, you want to send them a copy of your resume or CV. You want to send your letter of recommendation writers the schools that you're applying to and their deadlines. You want to send them a statement of why you want to get a graduate degree, because those 3 things will help them craft their letter. Most graduate programs want to know why you're excited about pursuing grad school, right? That it's what you're going to contribute. So make sure your letter of recommendation writer knows and can include that in their letter. And most importantly, follow up. Faculty members are busy and you want to make sure that they're hitting that deadline. So asking for a letter. When you're asking for a letter, you want to make sure that you either meet in person, phone, video call. You can email them, email your faculty member and say, hey, I'm more than willing to do a video call if you have any questions about why I'm interested in grad school, why I'm applying to grad school. And one really important question you want to ask your letter of recommendation writers is, would you be willing to write me a strong letter of recommendation? Strong is a really important word there. You don't want a weak letter. You don't want someone who says, yeah, they were in my class. That's not helpful to you. So you want someone who can write you a strong letter of recommendation. And again, you want to give them all the universities and the deadlines. And again, you want to follow up. So transitioning over to your statement of purpose. Your statement of purpose is an essay explaining why you want to go to graduate school. You want to be very careful to look at directions from university to university. And you will likely be tweaking these from each university, from each application to each university. So some applications might also ask for a personal statement. And so a personal statement is a little different than a statement of purpose. A personal statement is more of a story about you, rather than a statement of purpose, which is really your statement of purpose of pursuing a graduate degree. So how will you contribute to that graduate program that you're applying to? A statement of purpose typically is about 300 to 500 words. That is short. That's about a page. It's a lot in a small space. And it's going to really demonstrate your ability to communicate. You want to use that simple and direct language as much as possible. It's going to explain your purpose for pursuing grad study, your purpose for studying at a specific institution like Purdue. It's going to talk about your research interests. And so like the question in the chat earlier, maybe you're interested in this broad research area and you like these specific faculty, or maybe you're torn between 2 different research areas. You can talk about that. You can talk about your research interests. Your statement of purpose should really talk about what experiences you're going to bring to the table as a grad student. What are your passions? And it'll also talk about your career goals. It should also include any special circumstances. So for example, if there's a gap in your study, maybe you took some time off, put in a sentence to talk about that. Don't belabor it, don't take a huge paragraph, but you can take a sentence to say, I took a year off because of this, or my grades were lower this semester because COVID and I was a caregiver, right? Like you want to be able to explain some of those things and provide some background and insight to the admissions committee, things that they can't see on a transcript. And again, you want to show mutual benefit. So, why should we as a university choose you as a graduate student? And why should you as a future grad student choose us? How is this going to be a good fit on both sides? And again, it's a lot in a small space. You don't want to be gimmicky. You want to state your purpose. And again, you'll tailor this to each and every university. So, excuse me. Your statement of purpose should answer 3 specific questions. What have you done? And what did you learn from it? what are your future career, your future plans for this degree? And so this is really talking about your career goals. What are you going to do on the other side after you get your grad degree? Why should we invest in you as a, as a future alumni? And then why are you selecting this program, this graduate program or institution to meet your goals? Maybe you love that Purdue has Burke Nanotech facility and you're super jazzed about nanotechnology, and that's the coolest thing. Talk about it, right? Talk about why Purdue is a good fit for you to meet your goals and for you to learn and train as a graduate student. So what else should you talk about in your statement of purpose? You want to, I'm going to kind of go over a couple phrases that you can use to describe some of your different experiences. So one of them, one statement you can use is, as an undergrad researcher in X, therefore I can now, maybe think critically and work independently, right? Since taking a class in, let's say, exploratory data, now I've been kind of exposed to this different area, and now I'm ready to really hit the ground running, in my PhD and dive even deeper into data, right? Another scenario is, during my time as president of X, or say president of, Society of Women Engineers, I learned to, lead a team, and, this is really going to help me as I kind of work towards being a grad student and hire undergrads and mentor undergrads. So, there are definitely different ways that you can phrase your current experiences in a way that really shows your potential contribution as a future graduate student. And so how do you really talk about your future plans? I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but you want to talk about specifically, you want to put in what degree you're looking to study and why. Again, you want to talk about flexibility with interests, but maybe you narrow it down to 2 or 3. Maybe you're like, I'm interested in this broad field, and you narrow. You want to, for your future career, you kind of want to start talking more generally about career plans rather than saying like, I want to work at Tesla, I want to work at Google. Maybe you say, I want to, work in the automotive industry in R&D. Maybe you say, I want to be a university professor instead of, I want to work at Purdue as a professor. So again, it's very important how you craft and how you talk about your future plans. And a very, very important aspect of your statement of purpose is to customize and really talk about why this specific institution or program. Like I said, you are going to be writing or tweaking your statement of purpose for each university you apply to. So you want to really demonstrate familiarity with the graduate program. You want to name drop a couple faculty that you are interested in potentially working with and why. You want to talk about how your background fits and how you're really qualified to succeed at a specific institution. You don't want to get all flowery with your language, and you don't want to overstate the obvious. So terms used in promotions, university achievements and rankings. I cannot tell you how many students statements of purpose that I've read that says Purdue is ranked blank and it's a great place to be. The admissions committee knows this. You can talk about how the research connects. You can talk about how you're excited about working with specific faculty. I would leave out rankings and university achievements. So your statement of purpose before you submit, I said it before, your statement of purpose is a lot of information in a very small space. You want to be as specific, brief as possible, but very explicit. And you want to use details and facts. I would encourage you to go through and test each sentence individually. Is it important to tell them something? Does it relate back to the thesis of your statement of purpose, which is why you're passionate about going to graduate school? Does it sound natural? Do you have a lot of unnecessary adjectives? Take them out, tighten up your sentences. Very, very important to proofread. And, a lot of times we'll write things and it's hard to find your own mistakes sometimes. So have other people read your statement of purpose. and get feedback, get comments, start early so that you can do this. Okay, cool. I'm going to now take some questions on letters of recommendation and statement of purpose. And I do still have some time to talk about funding. I want to leave some time for Q&A. So I am going to move down. Okay. Do students looking to pursue a PhD typically reach out to specific professors about doing research with them, or do they typically just apply to a program they're interested in? It can go either way. So I would always recommend, if you have the opportunity to reach out to a professor, to try to do so. Some programs, like our chemical engineering program, for the PhD, you actually come in as, and materials engineering, you come in as a cohort. So you don't have to reach out to faculty ahead of time. Some programs I would recommend reaching out to faculty ahead of time. Do you have to be accepted by a professor you would like to work with before you can apply to a PhD? If you're not accepted by a professor, does it affect your admissions? What I like to say, typically most PhD programs, it's very similar to the one before, the question before. Typically PhD programs will want to make sure that they have faculty who are interested in working with you. So again, if you can make that connection and make that network with faculty before you apply, can be really helpful. They can bat for you when you're kind of going through the admissions process. So making connections can be great. But like I said, some programs do admit you as kind of a cohort. And so they'll look at how you fit with the broader graduate program. Typically, you can find out this information by going to that specific graduate program's website. A lot of them have frequently asked questions, and take your time to go over and do your research on that graduate website. Okay, still looking. So what is your recommendation do you have for people who want to work in industry for a year or two before applying to PhD programs? Or a great question. It really has to do with you, right? I can share all the information about a graduate program, but if you are in your heart know that you want to go to industry for a couple of years, then that's perfectly fine. Your journey after your undergrad, everyone's journey looks a little different. So if you want to work in industry and kind of gain some experience, maybe like really narrow your focus and get a little bit more in depth in a specific area, then if that's for you, then go for it. And if you decide to come back for a PhD program, know that we're certainly here. And most of our grad students, I'll give you, so when I started grad school in the Boston area, in my cohort, half of us had been out in industry and then half of us had gone directly into a PhD. So you're going to have a split, and it'll really vary. And you'll bring different experiences based off of your past experiences. Will it be a competitive advantage, disadvantage if I do grad school in something different from undergrad? That is completely okay. It's okay to pivot. We actually see a lot of undergrads come out with maybe a mechanical engineering background, and then they move into biomedical engineering. Or maybe they're civil engineers as undergrad and they move into environmental and ecological engineering. So there's a lot of, you can pivot. I think you just need to state your motivation for wanting to go in a different direction. And that is okay. What if you still don't really know what you want to study? What I would recommend is doing a little bit of your homework, digging into websites, looking at some faculty and what research they do, and seeing if it's of interest to you. A lot of times, if you're still a younger student, you can take some courses in these different areas and see if they're of interest to you as well. And if you are a younger student and you're not really sure what you want to study in grad school, summer research is a great way of dipping your toe in that pool to learn a little bit more about what you might like and what you might not like. It's important to learn both of those. So who should we get a letter of recommendation from? I am a 2020 graduate working for 1 year, and I have a few internships. So again, I would recommend, depending on if you're applying to a master's or a PhD program, letters of recommendation from faculty members, and potentially you could get someone from a current employer as well. Is it better to have research experience or industry experience? Love that question. It depends on what you want to do, right? If you're interested in going into industry in the future, then having an internship can't hurt you. Also, having an academic research experience also can't hurt you. So I would say that if you're interested in going into a PhD, I would really encourage you to get an academic research experience. That'll be very helpful, so that you know what you're getting into for the PhD as well. Okay. Can my communications professor write me a letter of recommendation for me? If they know you in a capacity of leadership, then that might be good. I would highly recommend getting not technical letters, but getting faculty who are from more STEM-oriented fields to write you a letter. However, if you have two really research faculty and you have someone from one of your other engineering courses or math courses, and then you want another letter, then that's fine too. But I would always recommend going with more of those technical ones who can speak to what you will be doing in the future. Yeah, so that's a similar question. Can you get a letter of recommendation from an instructor, has a PhD but is not a professor? That would be okay. Certainly you want them to be able to talk about your experience. Okay. I work with 2 professors who do joint research. Should I get an individual one from each, or should I have one total from them, 2 extra? So I think it would depend on your capacity that you are working with those different faculty members. So if you're working on different projects, then potentially you'd want 2 different letters. If it was the same project, then maybe you get 1. Can my letter be written by a grad student who's now a professor at a university? That one's a little bit more tricky. I would say that would potentially be okay, because now they're currently in that space and they have a PhD. Okay, I'm going to jump over. Yes, I'm providing lots of slides. I will send this out after. And we are going to keep talking about funding so that I can make sure we stay on time. Okay. So I want to quickly move on to funding and talk about funding and talk about how that relates to the application process. And bottom line is that funding is out there for you to pursue your master's or PhD. And about 70% of Purdue's full-time grad students, master's and PhD students do receive funding. And so I want to briefly talk about external funding sources and internal funding sources. So external funding sources come in the form of fellowships and grants, employer funding. So if your employer would fund you to come back, there's government funding, there's different organizations. There's also loans and self-paying, and I will say these loans and self-paying forms of external funding are typically more common if you're looking to pursue a non-thesis or course-based master's degree. And so it's important to know that non-thesis or professional master's programs do not come with any form of funding. You are not eligible for any internal forms of funding. So you can certainly Google a lot of those things as well, a lot of different forms of funding sources. Internal funding tends to be in the form of fellowships and grants, and then also assistantships, research, teaching, and administrative. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I would encourage you, if you want to learn more about funding specifically, to come to the talk next Wednesday night with Dr. Janet Beagle. She will go deeper into these different topics. And so funding, again, for grad school can be a little time consuming if you're looking for it, but money is definitely out there. And many different online sources exist to look for funding. And when weighing kind of funding offers from different universities, it's really important to remember the cost of living for each location. And living expenses can really dramatically vary and make a big difference in your financial situation. I will just say that, when I was a grad student in Massachusetts, my rent was double what it is out here in Indiana. So, that will really affect how far your stipend goes, or your funding. So how do you get funding? So in terms of the internal process, once you apply to a graduate program, and specifically, I'm going to focus on PhD admissions here, you'll be considered for any internal university funding opportunities, including different fellowships and assistantships with your application, and as part of your admissions. Other fellowships and assistantships might have a separate application process. And so it's really important that you're, really filling out any of the optional essays that might be on an application, because sometimes those are tied to different forms of funding as well. So if there's a piece of the application, if they're asking you for a statement, provide a statement. You want to check in with your specific graduate program of interest to see if they guarantee funding. Some programs will expect you to find a specific faculty member to support you from the beginning. This is really common for a master's degree, thesis master's students. You'll really need that faculty connection to obtain funding. And many programs have admitted students visits where you can actually meet those professors. And you can also reach out to faculty you might be interested in working with directly. So I want to go over a couple really interesting anecdotes from our current grad students about contacting professors in their own words. And so this, one student said, I didn't have to be interviewed before being accepted. However, to find my advisor, I guess you could say I had unofficial interviews. So this would be a student maybe who reached out to a faculty member ahead of time, and was able to kind of start that process. So they needed additional vetting because they had those unofficial interviews. Another student said, individual professors have a lot of power in choosing which students get accepted. Find a professor you can work well with and get along with well, and you have a good chance of getting in. Another student said, it's okay to not know everything. Professors do not expect that from you, but you should be familiar with what they do. It can be easy to get nervous when you talk with professors who are experts, but once I remember that they're human too, it helps me take some of the edge off my nerves. And so I really like this quote because, if you already knew everything that if you already had that master's or PhD, you wouldn't be applying to a graduate program, right? And so it's okay to not know everything, but it's really important to be transparent about what you do and do not know, and make sure that you're putting in the legwork and the research to become familiar with what faculty members do. It'll just allow you to ask even more in-depth questions, which will be great. Another student said reaching out to professors kind of felt more like a first date than it really did a formal interview. So it can be a little awkward, and I encourage you to just kind of push through that awkwardness. Finally, another student said it's just as important to have a good fit with your future advisor as it is to have the right, as it is to find the right research. Some professors will not be right for you, and that is okay. And so this student really touches upon how important it is to have that good faculty fit, but also a good personal fit. So how is that faculty member going to mentor you? How are you going to professionally work with them? Do they have the same style as you? All of these things are really, really important to think about before you start. So contacting professors and researching grad school when you're reaching out to faculty, don't email blast a whole bunch of people. Do your research first into the faculty member. keep your email as short as you can and polite. And we really want to kind of engage with that faculty member's research as well. You don't want to only email them asking for funding. And like I said at the beginning of this talk, there's other folks out there. If you have questions about the admissions related process, you should be reaching out to those graduate school programs, your specific discipline. You shouldn't be, emailing faculty and asking about GPA requirements. That's not appropriate, and you're not asking the right people. So I would again encourage you also to develop a list of schools and do your research. And if you're still trying to figure out where do I start talking with your professors, any professionals you've worked with on internships, current grad students, mentors, advisors, etc. And so my big recommendation for this fall is to really start early as possible with your graduate applications, whether you're already in your senior year or maybe you're a sophomore or junior. It's never too early to start. You want to set deadlines for yourself and your letter of recommendation writers. Start writing your statement of purpose. Start preparing for the GRE if it's required. If you're interested in applying to external fellowships, find them and start applying. And you really want to set deadlines and hold yourself accountable to these deadlines. And if you're still thinking about, is grad school the next step, and does it align with my career goals, then start talking to as many people as you can. Figure out if it's right for you. You don't just want to ride the momentum into grad school. You want to make sure that you have your purpose to pursue that graduate degree. So certainly prepare. Graduate school is definitely for you if you're interested. And I want to just kind of do a shout out for some other ways to engage with Purdue Engineering this upcoming fall, and then I'll take questions. So like I said, next week is a graduate school funding seminar. If you're interested in getting an application fee waiver to Purdue, there is the virtual grad, the Purdue Engineering virtual grad showcase. That is October 3rd and 4th. That'll be virtual. And like I said, you can get an application fee waiver. We have a graduate diversity visitation program where you can actually, if you're in the United States, you can be invited to campus to come be on campus, and that is on campus this year. And then if you're a younger student and you're interested in summer research, then we do have a SURF program. And so that application, it tends to be between December and January of, that's going to be 2022, sorry, typo. So I am going to leave this up, and then I will take questions. And I do know a number of them have come in. And so I'll start with this one right off the top because it's a really great question. How many graduate programs do students usually apply to? It really depends on your interests. I've known students who knew Purdue was for them. They applied to one school, they had that faculty connection, they were excited about starting at Purdue. But then I've also known students who apply to 5 to 7 schools. So they have some safeties, they have some schools that they know that are good fits, and they have some reach schools. So there's certainly a spectrum there. Is there a benefit to having a letter of recommendation from someone I worked with professionally, assuming that they have a PhD? Yes, that would be beneficial. Are fellowships offered to international students? Yes, fellowships are. So there are internal fellowships and assistantships that are offered. There are some national external fellowships that are only eligible to US citizens. So some of the big ones that are external fellowships include the National Science Foundation. They have a graduate research fellowship program that as a senior you guys can actually apply to, and then you can apply once when you are actually a graduate student as well, and that is open to US citizens. Are applications reviewed on a rolling basis or only after the deadline? They typically are you want your application to be in on time. So a lot of times if you submit your application late, you won't be considered for any forms of funding. And I assume you all want to get paid to go to grad school. So get your application in on time. is a resident assistant something that I can do while in grad school? Typically not. So an RA, it tends to be called a research assistantship, where you're actually doing research. I'm not familiar with anyone who is more of a resident assistant. Did that one. So if I'm a master's of engineering, and if I'm a MEM student, can I be a research assistant? No, because the MEM program is a non-thesis course-based program where professors don't respond to emails. I feel you. Send a follow-up. So sometimes faculty don't respond. It is appropriate to send maybe one email. If they don't respond within a couple of days, send an email saying, Dear Professor X, I'm just following up on the email below. Could you reply to, and then insert like your ask, your question. If you send an email that has no ask or no question, you will likely not get a response because there's no question for a professor to answer. So maybe you send an email saying, can we schedule a time to talk? Here's my resume. I'm interested in your lab. And make sure there's a nice question in there. Should we reach out to faculty if we're applying to a master's program? If you're applying to a thesis-based or research-based master's program, you certainly can respond to faculty. You certainly can reach out to faculty. Are these open to international students? I'm not sure what that is in regard to. The virtual engineering graduate showcase is open to international students. We welcome international students to come and meet our graduate programs. And I will say that the virtual graduate showcase, actually, we're going to have all of our different engineering disciplines there. There's going to be like breakout sessions with them, so you can learn a little bit more about each of those specific programs. So if you're really excited about learning more about robotics and mechanical engineering at Purdue, come, because they'll be there. So certainly want to encourage you to do that. So SURF program. So if I can talk a little bit more about that, I would, again, it's a cohort-based program, this Pathway Scholars program, where for summer research, you're coming to campus as a cohort, and there's a lot of different programming that's involved that helps you learn almost like how to be a mini grad student by doing research. So SURF program is always very highly recommended, and there are other universities that also have similar programs. So do some Googling, find out deadlines, and get those applications in after your fall semester wraps up. The biggest thing with summer research, that December to January deadline can be really hard if you need to get a letter of recommendation. So if you're planning on submitting an application to summer research, then make sure that you ask your faculty for a letter of recommendation before you leave your fall semester. That can be really helpful. Okay. I am looking. Is it possible to delay acceptance if I'm looking to get a year of industry experience before pursuing a PhD? Deferrals are a thing. You can apply to grad school, and if for some reason you need to defer for a semester or a year, depending on the program, there'll be a different time amount that you can defer, but you can defer if you need to do so. GDVP is only open to, I would have to check on that if it's open to international students in the United States. I would encourage you to check out their website. If you Google GDVP Purdue, you can certainly find that. Some programs require a diversity essay, but I didn't talk about it. Yes, correct. That is going to be another one of those optional essays. Purdue University does have a diversity essay, and actually our engineering graduate programs look at that diversity essay to put students up for specific internal fellowships. So I would really encourage you to to complete any essays. There are instructions typically on the admissions website about what you should include in those. So I would encourage you, make a list of grad schools you're interested in, and be sure to have what you need for each of them. Maybe do a column, are the GREs required, what essays are required, etc. So, okay, and with that, I recognize the time, so I'm more than happy to stay on and take a couple more questions, but I do recognize that we are at 7 o'clock Eastern time, so if you have to leave, that is completely okay. And thank you for coming and joining us today. And be sure to engage with Purdue Engineering more in the future as well. So, and like I said, I will hang on to do some additional Q&A. Yeah, so Jared, what did you mean about self-paying as an option for an external method of paying for grad school? So I will say that there are some non-thesis master's students or professional master's students who are paying out of pocket for their grad degree, and that does happen. But we do try to fund as many graduate students as we can. Purdue Engineering actually has 3,900 graduate students right now. So we are the largest public engineering college in the United States. So we do try to fund as many of our graduate students as possible. But if you're not doing research, then typically you don't really have as many assistantship type options. So typically those students who are doing a non-thesis or a course-based degree will self-pay. So they will pay for their own degree or take out loans to pay for their degree. And then I've gotten a lot of questions on converting GPAs. There are GPA calculators out there, I believe. So I would look into that or see if your university has that service provided. Will taking a grad level course as an undergrad help my application? That can be really helpful for you to, it can be helpful, it certainly can. It'll be helpful for you to get a better idea of what a grad level course is like. So that's certainly a recommendation. It'll also allow you to zone into maybe something that's a little bit more in-depth and narrow and a little more deep into the discipline that you want to be into. So for example, I took a neuroscience course as an undergrad that was a grad level course, and that was very helpful for me to kind of move into my more biomedical engineering background. Do I still need TOEFL if I apply to another grad school other than Purdue? Or does it depend on the school being applied to? The advice I'm giving right now is all Purdue focused advice. If you're applying to Northwestern or Ohio State or MIT, those are all you're gonna have to look on their websites for what their specific graduate application requirements are. Are there self-paying PhDs? No, not typically. Mechanical engineering department GRE says that it's not required for fall 2021 and spring 2022 applicants. Yeah, so if it seems like there's outdated information on a website, so if we're applying to fall 2022 as a GRE required, you're going to have to check in with mechanical engineering specifically for that answer. And so I would email, I think it's like megradoffice@purdue.edu, and you can go online and find that email address. So don't hesitate to reach out to folks, guys. If you don't know a question for a very specific program, reach out to that program and ask. If a professor asks us to draft a letter of recommendation for them, what is the best way to go about writing a good draft? So that's hard, because I would always recommend that, if you're asking a faculty member to write you a letter of recommendation, a strong letter of recommendation, then they should be able to craft that letter. If you're uncomfortable doing that, I would reply and say, Dear Professor X, I'm uncomfortable writing my own letter of recommendation, but here is, a couple paragraphs of why I'm interested in a graduate degree. And you can certainly provide them with context. You can provide them with information from your point of view. You can send them your statement of purpose. I would dissuade against writing your own letter of recommendation. You want to make sure faculty can write letters. If they don't think they can write a strong one, then maybe you reach out to a different faculty member. Some of my grades have slipped in a specific semester because of mental health issues. I've been dealing with this. What is a valid topic to talk about in our statement of purpose? Yeah, so you can certainly address that. One thing I would recommend, I think with every challenge, there's an uphill after, right? You think about, a curve, right? We're all going to have really low points in our life, and that's okay, but it's what you learn and how you deal with that makes you an even better person on the other side. So it's okay, things happen, it's okay. And what I would say is you can say that I had this hardship and I've learned XYZ, or I've learned how to manage my time. I've learned how to protect my work-life balance and still be productive, right? You can talk about this in other ways in your statement of purpose, and you can address that as well. You can address how your grades were connected with that. And I would again encourage you to have a very succinct statement of, my grades were low this semester because of mental health issues. I've since learned that I can address that in these ways. And I plan to do this in grad school and beyond. A question about the grad showcase. Something about more or less, I've submitted a poster to be a presenter. I have not submitted a poster. Am I still eligible for the application fee waiver? Yes. So the grad showcase is pretty cool. It has a poster presentation aspect to it. You do not have to submit a poster to get the application fee waiver. If you participate in the event, and it'll be on a platform, and there'll be lots of cool ways that you can participate in addition to the poster, then you will be eligible for the application fee waiver. Do I have to have specific research goals before applying to a PhD? You should have a general idea of what excites you and what research areas you want to move into. Are you expected to have the specific experiments you want to do planned out? No, that'll come as a conversation, collaboration with the faculty member that you're working with. So you don't have to have specific research aims or very specific goals, but you're going to want to make sure that you know the specific area you're interested in working in. Is it more difficult to receive funding if you are not doing a thesis master's? Is it more difficult? So if you're not doing a thesis master's, so a research-based master's, that means you'd be doing a non-thesis-based master's. And yes, that is more difficult to receive funding because you're not doing research. If you're invited to campus for a visitation weekend, you can't make it. Will this harm your chances of selection, acceptance into the program? I think if you have a valid reason for why you can't make it, then you communicate that with your department, and then that's okay. So I think especially with COVID, things are going to happen, things are going to come up. So I think we all need to stay as safe as possible. And if there's something that conflicts, then you have that conversation. So it should not affect your chances of selection or acceptance into the program, but you want to make sure that you're getting an alternative way of still making those connections so that you can properly visit and be connected with faculty and students on campus. So it might take a little bit of extra legwork, but you're going to want to talk with folks about that. Okay, and with that, I'm going to wrap up our session today. So thank you all for attending, and be sure to check out Janet's presentation next week on funding in order to get more in-depth information on that. So I hope you guys all have a great night, and I will wrap this up. So have a great rest of your night or day, depending on where you are. Bye.